to this edition of the Impact Disciple Making Podcast. I'm Mike Keaton, your host, and I am glad that you have joined us today. I am here with Ken Adams, lead pastor of Crossroads Church, and also the founder of Impact Ministries. And we've been having conversations about disciple making. And most recently, we started a conversation about the ingredients of disciple making. And so, Ken, you told us this really cool story about this boy and, doing this job, and there were certain things that he needed to do that job well. Vision, tools, training, and motivation. Remind us a little bit about that, and then let's talk about some of that motivation today.
Yeah, Mike, I heard an analogy a few years ago that I just feel like it's such a great example of really kind of what it takes for a church to be able to build a disciple-making ministry, and even for an individual to really start a lifestyle of disciple-making. There are a couple things that are very important, and so those are all kind of illustrated in this analogy. So this is a story about a teenage guy that's laying on a couch during the summertime playing video games, and his mother comes in and says, "Hey son, I want you to go edge the yard." And so he ends up going out with a shovel or a rounded shovel, and he starts trying to edge the yard with the shovel, and next thing you know, he's botched it up. He's made a mess out of the driveway and the yard. And so his mom says, "No, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go up the street to Mr. So-and-so's house, and I want you to ask him to show you how to edge the yard, and then you come back and edge the yard." So he goes up to his neighbor's house, and the man brings out a flat-nosed shovel, and he walks him through exactly how he edges his driveway, and then he teaches him how to do it, and he gives him a chance to do it, and then he comes back and he edges the yard, the yard next to the driveway, just like his neighbor did, and his mom is thrilled by that. And so it's a great example of how, first of all, if we're going to make disciples, we've got to have the right vision. We've got to see what it looks like. Secondly, we've got to have the right tools. So just like this guy had the wrong shovel, we're going to get the wrong results. The third thing is we need some training. And so his neighbor gave him a chance to do it before he did it. And so then the last thing is that we need the motivation, because you know what? Sooner or later, you got to get off the couch, man. You got to go do it. And so, so it's just really kind of a great analogy of what we need, even in our lives, to really be obedient to the Great Commission, man. So
for a church leader, or anyone really who wants to impact other people's lives and to make disciples, tell us about that motivation. What is that?
Yeah, well, that obviously is the key, isn't it? Because you can have great vision, perfect tools, right, spot on training, but if you don't decide to do the right thing with it, no results are going to happen. And so, when I think about what it takes to motivate somebody to be about making disciples, being and building disciples, Mike, there's about 2 or 3 things that really, really come to my mind, and I go back to the original 12. I go back to the original disciples, and so the question of what does it take to motivate us to make disciples is answered with the same question asked about the original disciples. So when Jesus finished training the small band of disciples that he had, what was the difference? What motivated them to go out and to reproduce the process, or for the whole thing to have fallen apart, and we wouldn't even be sitting here talking about it today if they hadn't had that motivation. So I think there's really 3 key factors in motivation. Obviously the first thing is we just got to be obedient, right? And so Jesus made it very clear. He gathered these disciples, the Bible says, on a mountainside outside Galilee, and he said, I want you to go make disciples. And people say it all the time, it wasn't the great suggestion. It's the Great Commission, man. And so we are still to this day, we are commanded to make disciples. And so you know what, Mike? Either we obey or we don't obey.
Right.
Either we are doing what Jesus told us to do or we're not. But I don't think that's all that it took to motivate them. I think the second thing is that love has to be the driving force. And so, they obeyed Jesus' commands for two reasons. One is because of their love for him. Because you know what? If you love somebody, you'll do what they ask you to do.
Right.
So obviously, they continued what Jesus did with them because they wanted to be obedient, but also because they were driven by their love for him and also by their love for humanity, by their love for their by their friends and their neighbors who were far from God. And then, I think there's a third thing that when you go back to the New Testament and you ask the question, what motivated them to be obedient? And I think that is the fact that they literally saw the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so when you see Jesus crucified on a cross and then 3 days later risen from the dead, you know it's real.
Yeah, can you imagine?
And so if you know it's real, then here's what's going to happen. You're going to be compelled to go and to share that with other people.
Right.
So
just plain old-fashioned obedience, start off with. Our love, our heart, passion, compassion for our fellow man, the world really, and then just, the power of that resurrection.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, Ken, it's funny, I heard this quote the other day I thought was really good, because really what all that describes is the why. Motivation is about the why. And I heard this quote, and the guy said that when people lose their why, they lose their way.
That's exactly right, man.
And so that's what we've got to have, is that motivation. So,
very good.
So there you have it, the motivation, and it's the last ingredient of disciple making, the tools, the ingredients necessary for disciple making. So we hope that this has been helpful for you today. So thankful that you joined in with us, and we hope that you'll tune in next time on the Impact Disciple Making Podcast.